Hey Mavs fans, welcome back to another edition of the CCR Roofing Summer Interview Series. I'm Ray Schmidt, and it is an absolute pleasure to have with me today the man at the proverbial head of the Mavericks table, Lamar Hunt Jr. Lamar, thanks so much for coming down. It's great to get a chance to talk with you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So, how has your summer been overall so far? We talked to Brent Thiessen a little while ago. He's been crazy busy with everything that's gone on with the team this summer. For you, how's it been?
He's probably busier than I am because he has to tend to more details. Summer's been great. Had cataract surgery, so I'm sort of working on trying to be glasses free, although I'm sure I'm going to need reading glasses. But my wife and I really just stayed around Kansas City, taking in some Royals games. Actually went to some Sporting KC games, things like that. Recently a Chiefs game, so just doing family stuff and hanging around the city.
Fantastic. That is excellent to hear. And how much of a difference is it for you whenever the Mavericks are in season versus out of season, time that you get to kind of catch your breath, be away from the arena a little bit, and distance yourself a little bit from all the emotion and everything that goes into making a season a success?
Well, it was a learning curve for me to be involved in the first full season with the Mavericks. The 36 home games is a whole lot to deal with, to coordinate, to be a part of. And you kind of have to pace yourself and not live necessarily with all the ups and downs of each game. But it's sort of, it's a cliche at this point, but it's definitely not a sprint. It's a marathon of a type of season.
That's one thing that I think. You say it's a cliche, and for a fan on the outside, they might get tired of hearing it, taking it game by game and not a sprint, but a marathon. But being around professional athletes, hockey players specifically, that's something that's always impressed me, is how they're able to compartmentalize one game in and of itself. Yeah. What did you think about being around that for the first time as an owner and seeing those guys be able to do that?
Well, they were able to let it go pretty easily, game to game. They didn't let it carry over, and we had such a successful season. I think that we kept the momentum going pretty much the entire season and won over 50 games and things like that. We didn't quite get there with the playoff run, and that's a whole different type of season, of course, in hockey. But I think I saw the team, because there's changes of personnel at times and things like that, really stayed cohesive, stayed on task. Many of them have been through it before. They've grown up playing hockey and things like that. So it's really more the staff and the sort of inner workings of the organization that really have to stay on focus and not get that sort of lull that happens in a long season.
So we're coming up on year two, the second full year for yourself as the owner of the Missouri Mavericks. And whenever you were introduced at your press conference back in February of 2015, talked about three main goals that you wanted to accomplish as the owner of the Mavericks. You wanted to raise the team's profile regionally, wanted to secure the affiliation with an NHL organization, and you wanted to increase the opportunities for youth hockey participation and growth in the Kansas City area. So we look back on the timeline of since you've been the owner, the NHL affiliation seems to be a rousing success. We've had a Maverick graduate, Ross Johnston, already to the National Hockey League. The mention, the 52 wins last year, setting a club record. So that seems to be positive all the way around. For the other two goals, how do you feel about the progress that's being made towards raising the team's profile and increasing the participation in youth hockey in the area?
Well, raising the team's profile is certainly a work in progress. We do suffer in this community a little bit from that state line perception. And anybody that knows the Kansas, Missouri, not so much the history, is not necessarily to rehash that, but just the rivalries that they have. And there is sort of a compartmentalization between the two communities, if you will. So our reach into the Kansas area, into the Overland Park, that area, is extremely important. It's still a work in progress. I think there's just a lot of avenues of awareness that we still have to continue to explore. I do think that there's an education level that the average sports fan or even a passionate sports fan doesn't really know that much about hockey. And so we need to try to continue to educate them and let them know about what's going on in the National Hockey League, the American Hockey League, and in the ECHL, and how the world of hockey works. So that's a work in progress. As far as the youth, we united the all the youth organizations under one roof, called it the Kansas City Youth Hockey Association. We sort of modeled it after what was done in Omaha. In other words, having a website that everybody can go to and register, and a sort of a clearinghouse, one sort of autonomous body, board of directors, people running it, so you don't have all these kind of clans out there doing different things. That's been really actually really more successful than I think we even thought it would be. Very few complaints, very few difficulties. Increased participation all across the board. Obviously with coaches, more coaches that are interested in coaching, getting the training. You can do some of it online, things like that. All the participation is up 10, 12, 15%, introducing people to the sport of hockey. Where we're still, fighting hard is to build some sheets of ice, and we've also talked about the USHL, the United States Hockey League franchise, and things like that, which we think would be a great addition to the Kansas City community. The league is the highest level of developmental hockey in the United States, and many players go on to have professional careers from that league. So those are all works in progress as far as the sheets of ice and trying to just grow the footprint of hockey, and we really do need to probably do that over in the Kansas area.
Absolutely. Now, talking back about raising the Mavericks profile overall, I know that you spent a lot of time bringing an element of education as to the history of hockey in the Kansas City area, specifically to the Silverstein Ice Center's arena. And I'm curious to find out from you, how does the history of hockey in Kansas City help to raise that Mavericks brand? Because there have been high levels of hockey in Kansas City throughout history, I think going back all the way to the 1920s, if I'm remembering right. So there's been important high-level hockey, the National Hockey League, the International Hockey League here. So from my perspective, I would think that would kind of help to raise the Mavericks brand a little bit, carrying on that tradition.
I think it will. I think what we wanted to do, we did the hockey history wall, and we tried a couple of different angles, even sort of collecting some memorabilia, which we decided to display it, and things like that was kind of awkward. So what we wanted to do was just give a sort of thumbnail sketch of the time periods, the arenas, and the history of the sport, and also who passed through here. I mean, actually Gordie Howe played here. He played for Omaha at the time, and there have been some other players that have gone on to Hall of Fame careers. So that was an extremely important thing to my heart, to get it done and sort of lay out for people, this is a substantial history. There is a substantial history here to deal with. Where I think we've fallen down in Kansas City is, I think, ownership is one of those things that comes around. I mean, if you look at the franchises in any league that are successful, and I'll use the one in hockey as one of the most obvious one, is Ed Snyder in Philadelphia, who passed away, I believe, it's been maybe a year ago, or maybe last spring. Anyway, he owned the team for 50 years. He started the team and he owned it, and he passed at age 83, and he just became, besides his other businesses, he became a person that was really known for doing what he did. And so that consistency kept it alive, because there were no doubts that there have been down times, even for the National Hockey League, as far as strikes or work stoppages or these sorts of things that go on, or people digging in their heels and just not getting along, right? Those things happen. And so I think you have to have that sort of continuity of ownership. And so the Mavericks, we have a chance, this is the 8th year of the franchise. I think the longest time a franchise played here was 10 years, the Blades. So we really have a good chance to eclipse that sort of record, if you will, or that milestone, if you will, of having that consistency of ownership, God willing, in my case, but more importantly, for the community to have that presence. Fort Wayne in our league is an example of a team that's been in business over 60 years, and just what that has meant for that community. And I think that's the most important thing is, yes, we give something to the community, which is entertainment, also competition, but the community gives back in so many ways with the fans and the things that mean something to people.
In a city like Kansas City, where the major league sports are such an important part of the city's identity, the Chiefs, the Royals, and Sporting all play a huge role in the sports scene here. When it comes to raising the Mavericks brand, what kind of strategies do you implement to, I know that you can't necessarily compete with the attention that those teams draw and the traditions that they have established. They've been around for decades and decades, But what's the strategy like for trying to find the niche that the Mavericks fill within that sporting community in the city?
Well, the great niche that we fill is the one of hockey, of professional ice hockey. Just right out of the chute there's not a whole lot of hockey being played in the area. There's not even a Division I program in the area like you have up in Omaha, a Division I program there for ice hockey. But we do have club teams at Kansas and Missouri. I think they're going to be playing here later this season. But I think that's the first niche, is that we have that niche. So we need to obviously cultivate that niche. And I think that's what we need to do. I just think it's a matter of gradual education. I think it's a matter of also understanding that football is going to have sort of the broadest footprint, and then baseball. We have very good college basketball in the area, of course. Sporting is filling the soccer niche. So we have a privilege to be in that hockey niche, which I think is something that we can hold on to and be proud of. And I think when people come and see the experience, I know this firsthand in introducing it to people that we've invited to games. They said they had no idea. They had no idea how fun this was.
The live experience of a game at any level can't be compared to anything else.
Right. I think professional sports, college sports, any sort of sports, you want to be there live if you can. TV is a nice medium and it's a nice party time, but live sports, and I think hockey, more so than most of the other sports, there's an intimacy to it that happens right here and now.
So you touched a little bit earlier on your efforts to bring the USHL to the Kansas City area, and from things I hear, that's all moving along the way that you would want it to be. How does that play into growing the game? I know that's something that you talk about a lot, just the effort to grow the game, grow participation in this area. So what's the synergy like between the Mavericks and the USHL whenever it gets started?
Well, the synergy between us is we're going to be sort of like the big brother looking over the little brother. We'll manage it with that. We can obviously bring continuity when we get and talk about ticket sales or sponsorships or community relations or all the different things that go on in a sports organization. We can bring that to the USHL franchise, and it's a nice fit. As far as the USHL, really I look at it as sort of a capstone, if you want to use that expression, or a cornerstone for the youth. It will definitely draw attention. It will bring the NHL scouts here. It will bring very, very good young players that will come and live in the community, go to school in the community. It will involve families. It will take them in. All these sorts of things will go on, and it becomes really a big part of the community. These teams do very, very well in places, again, like Omaha or Lincoln or Waterloo, Iowa, or different places, I think Des Moines, places like that. And they become a real little gem for the community, and I think that will be something that we will look for. It also gives kids at a younger age something to shoot for. You have sort of the capstone, the cornerstone, and everything sort of backfills in from there of like, this is what I'm working for. And it'd be great to grow some homegrown Kansas City area hockey players.
That was where I was starting to think, because it'd be fantastic. We saw in the NHL draft this past spring a high number of players from the St. Louis area go in the first and second round. But to be able to see a youngster start out in the KCYHA and then go on to the USHL team in the city, I think for community pride alone, that would be a huge source of inspiration.
Yeah, it would be awesome. And I think anything you can do to tie those things back to the community are wonderful. If you I think back over the years from the Chiefs' perspective, the players that have come from this area or were drafted from, say, a Kansas State or a KU or MU, people follow, or even the smaller schools. We've had players from smaller schools. It's just so exciting for the fans, their family, everything like that.
So we've kind of talked broad picture a lot about your three big goals as the owner of the Mavericks. I'd like to bring the focus back in a little bit and kind of drill it down to the anticipation of the 16-17 season starting. As of our conversation right now, we're about 2.5 months away from the start of the season, and people are waiting with bated breath to see what's going to take place. The team's announced roughly a half dozen or so players that it's signed so far, and the major storyline's been John Scott Dixon as the rookie head coach, third head coach in team history. And as the anticipation continues to build for the start of the season, I'd like to go back a little bit to that afternoon in late June, on June 30th, when you kind of led the press conference to introduce John Scott Dixon to the fans and the media. From the process of hiring him, getting in place as the team's head coach, what was your role in that process? What was your impression of John Scott throughout that process as well?
Well, the first thing I'll say to you is we're actually less than 2 months from the start of the season because we opened October.
That's true.
15th
right. I was
in
thinking
Allen.
about the home opener. That's true.
Yeah. Your homeowner opener is another 7 days later. So yeah, we'll be playing at Allen, our nemesis. I sort of think of them like the Oakland Raiders, growing up around the Oakland Raiders and having to deal with them. That process in looking for a coach was a lot of fun, but it was kind of a new experience, I think, for everybody, including Brent, because it was sort of wide open. And as we got into it, we got a lot of applications, we had a lot of interest, we had a lot of inquiries. I know Brent had a lot of conversations. And as we kept evaluating, we started to realize that right under our nose was the guy that we thought we should really take a hard look at. And the reason it wasn't that I pushed or Brent pushed, it was like we sort of mutually came together and said, wow, he's been a player, he's been an assistant coach, it's his time, he relates to young men very, very well, he's a stand-up guy, he's a family guy, he's a community guy, he was all these things. And I think it was a really good move on our part. And I'll pat ourselves on the back because again, it kind of goes back to he doesn't just have to be a coach. He shouldn't just be a coach. He has to sort of be in the community. He has to be, again, a missionary, if you want to use that word, someone who's going to sort of spread the word about the gospel of hockey, if you want to call it that, but about hockey and how fun it is. And he's a great representative. He's a good man. But he's also going to face challenges. Mm-hmm. You know, building the roster in the ECHL is a big challenge because every year it's almost from scratch, if you will. I mean, we do have help from our affiliates. We have conversations there, which are very helpful with the Islanders. And so that's so helpful to us to be able to sort of, if you will, ground our roster. But they're still going out and looking at tape, I guess, evaluating, going and talking to people, all the things he has to do to really build that roster. That's going to be something completely new for him to build that chemistry. Any good coach will tell you every year, no matter what you have coming back, every year is a different group of guys and a different team. And that, again, another cliche, team chemistry, but it is so, so very important that everybody get along and understand what the goal and mission is.
Absolutely, and this league is unique in the fact that you mentioned the roster has to be built from scratch almost every summer, and even sometimes during the season, whenever a rash of call-ups or injuries hit, and you really have to dig deep to find that depth to maintain success. And the thing that I think about is, having been around this league for a while, you see teams in Reading with Larry Corville, who's been a coach there for a long time. Greg Poss was in Florida, had a run of success there. And you see Derek Lalonde in Toledo was another one who came to mind. That coaches are essential to a team's success at this level because they have their hand in so much: recruiting, coaching, managing the team chemistry on a day-to-day basis. When all those factors come into play, I was kind of interested to hear Brent Thiessen be as candid as he was in my talk with him about the pressure that he felt in getting this decision right. Did you feel any of that same pressure while going through this process?
Maybe not as much as Brent felt. I would say that I've grown up around a father and organizations where coaching decisions had to be made, and sometimes very hard ones. I can say this now. I mean, my father had to fire at one point the best man at his wedding, Hank Stram from the Chiefs, or he felt he did. And I don't, I'm not saying anything out of school. It was just a tough time, and he'd been the coach 15 years. So, I lived around it and grew up around it and understood that it's part of the business. I know Brent uses a phrase, coaches get hired to get fired. I don't believe in that, and I don't think he does either, by the way. I think what we're discovering, they're doing studies now, everybody wants to study things. Turning your coaches over on a very quick basis is counterproductive to building the team and the organization at pretty much any level. You need to stay with the coach through the valleys. And I felt like with John Scott that he's a guy that when he goes through a valley, he's going to respond in a very positive way. An outsider, I felt like John Scott was so part of the community that an outsider wasn't going to see it the same way. And that is why I didn't feel necessarily the same pressure. I did mention very early to Brent that I said we may want to make sure we look at our assistant coach very carefully in this process. And I think, we both, once we started evaluating all the applicants and things like that, we realized, this was the guy. He was on the trajectory to do this and wants to do it. That's important.
What would you say to someone who would bring up that John Scott Dixon has had a fast track to being a head coach, doesn't have any head coaching experience, doesn't have a lot of coaching experience under his belt?
Well, we're a developmental league, so we're about developing players and we're about developing coaches. And I think it's his time to step up and develop as a head coach. That's what I would say. And I do think there's a trend now to give guys a shot that they've learned the paces. He knows what he's about. I think he's aware of who he is as a human being, as a person, and I think he'll handle himself great.
It's going to be a thrill to see how it all plays out. Training camp's coming up super fast. The beginning of October, training camp opens, and the players continue to come on to the roster. It's just anticipation is palpable, and I think that everybody's going to be thrilled to see what takes place once October gets here. Yeah,
when I get up early the last couple of days and I'm off to doing what I'm doing early in the morning, it's cool outside and you think it's starting to smell definitely like hockey and football.
Yeah, before we know it, the ice will be down and it'll be off to the races.
Yeah.
So we talked about a little bit last season and the club record 52 wins, and from being involved with the Mavericks the short time that I have, you get a sense that the expectation of success is there every year. A few years ago, first overall in the Central Hockey League with 44 wins, #1 seed going into the playoffs. Last year, second year in the ECHL, 52 wins, Brabham Cup championship, club record for wins. And there's a lot of pride that comes with that. That regular season success is hard to achieve, but then it also sets up high expectations for the playoffs, which unfortunately were not met last season. So with everything that took place last year, how does that play into your expectations and your motivations for what you want to see happen this year?
Well, I said earlier that every season, every team is very unique. The chemistry of the players, the coaching, all those sorts of things. I mean, we have a new head coach. We will have a core of guys that will be back that were here before. It may be a handful, it may be a little bit more than a handful. Don't know at this point. What I think is important is that we be competitive every night. And I think that's extremely important for your home fans and your home games. That when they come out, they know they're seeing the best we have on that given night. Fans typically don't follow quite as carefully when you're on the road. Of course, we have a core of passionate fans who are going to follow everything. But they want to see the effort, entertainment value, if you want to call it that, at home. So I think that's extremely important, and I think that's the first step for us to be sure of, that when we're here we hold home ice. I don't know what the expression is in hockey, but we fight hard here. And I think beyond that, the playoffs become a different animal. They really do in hockey. There is, and that's proven statistically over the years, that sometimes lower seeds are going to beat higher seeds. In our case last year, really, the previous champion took us out, and hats off to them. They're good, they're well coached. Allen is sort of our nemesis. That's how I look at it at this point. Perhaps this year the third time will be the charm, finishing first and going all the way in the playoffs. A lot of teams we don't get to see during the year either as much as we'd like, and so that's a little bit different. But I think what's important is we make the playoffs. I think that's extremely important, is that we finish in the top half of the league, we make the playoffs, we get ourselves in a position to win the championship.
And, you know, from having been around the ECHL for a while myself, there used to be a belief that there was a Brabham Cup curse, that winning the regular season championship almost guaranteed that you wouldn't win the championship come playoff time. So maybe if the cards fall right, the Mavericks can kind of bunk that myth and that urban legend this year.
Sure. I mean, you had an NFL team, the New England Patriots, go undefeated and won, I don't know how many games it was, 18 games in a row, and the 19th game was was not their best game. So it happens even to probably arguably the best team of all time in that sport. It does happen. The Golden State Warriors are a great example this year of a team that just quite couldn't get it done, yet their regular season record was, they broke the record. They broke Michael Jordan's team's record. So it happens. I think what's important is that we develop that grit, that determination during the course of the season, because when the playoffs come, it's so many games that you have to sort of re-gear yourself at a higher level and have that sort of same grit and character. Last year, I think we had a lot of character as a team. Allen got us. But I think there will be a core group of guys in here. Our coach will be the same guy that was part of that, and he'll know how to coach it up and say, look, guys, this is what it's going to take.
When you talk about that playoff mindset, I find it interesting that almost to a man, every Mavericks player and signee that I've talked to over the summer talks about the team goal being a championship.
Sure.
We're 60 some odd days away from the start of the season, and they're already talking championships. So how encouraging is that to you to hear that mindset already at this point of the summer?
Well, talk is important, but there's a lot of work to be done. There's players to be signed, there's training camp to go through, there's evaluations to be made of the team. I think what you'll see with this team, and I'm not a guru or a prognosticator, but I think you'll see a team that will gradually build and develop as the year goes along. I think it's going to be new for everybody in the room, their role, other than perhaps some of the support people. But it's going to be new for everybody because we have a new head coach. We're going to have a lot of new faces.
A new captain.
Yeah, a new captain. But he's a veteran and he's been here, so he'll set a great attitude in the room. But very often, you're going to throw people into the mix, like you mentioned earlier, that they're going to have to be carefully evaluated as a guy that we want to keep around and be part of that mix and build the character of this team.
So we saw last summer or last fall I should say, how celebrated the Royals World Series championship was. What do you think it would mean to you, to the city, to the hockey fans in Kansas City for the Mavericks to bring a championship home?
Championships are rare. So I've learned to savor them. I'm waiting on another level for another championship from our Chiefs, our beloved Chiefs. And the Royals are just a great testimony to a team chemistry, character, all the decisions that were made. What it would mean, I think it would mean a whole lot to this community. I think first off, it would build that awareness and that enthusiasm. I think at the bottom line, it would say, wait a minute, there's something really fun and exciting happening out here, and it matters. We have a great foothold in the world of hockey, where we are. It makes sense to people, where we align the ECHL with the AHL and the NHL. So I think it really does mean something, and I think it would be very, very meaningful, and there'd be a lot of interesting stories. For the young men that do it, this is why you play. Yeah, obviously they're playing to achieve, to get to the next level, to maybe live the dream of playing at the highest level of hockey in the world. But you don't just show up and play casually. You play for championships. You're right.
Yeah, those guys really do sacrifice a lot over the course of the season.
They do.
I've seen long bus trips with guys loaded down with ice packs. And, spending time away from wives and children. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a lot that goes into it.
Right. The reward in some ways is the trophy, but it's also the journey. There's a certain journey that these guys are wired, that they're passionate about what they're doing, they love what they're doing. You have to love what you're doing or you won't stick with it. And you want to win. You want to beat the guy across from you.
So we've had a great conversation so far, Lamar. We've had a lot of interesting topics to cover. I think it'd be fun to wrap up with a little bit of rapid fire questions, some a little bit off the cuff, and pick your brain a little bit, okay?
All right, I'm ready.
So first one, if you could be, you've grown up around sports your entire life, obviously your father's legacy.
Yeah.
If you could be a professional athlete in any sport, what would you pick?
When I was young, I wanted to be a tennis player.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. That is
I know something. I'm still good at it. I'm
a lifelong sport.
I'm a little wobbly around the court these days.
What's your best shot? Backhand, forehand?
Backhand.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you have a bachelor's degree in music, former flutist in the Kansas City Symphony. Yeah. What's your favorite genre of music to listen to?
Classical music. We grew up, though, going to musicals on Broadway and things. We got some opportunities to see some of those shows back when we were younger, which was really exciting. But I really like kind of all kinds of music, but classical is going to be the number one.
Do you have a go-to favorite recording artist if you're maybe doing something around the house, you want to put on some music to listen to, one you go to?
You got to talk to my wife about that one. She controls that. She's going to be much more contemporary pop music.
Okay.
Like I said, I like it all. What I appreciate is good singing, good instrumentalists, things like that. Some of the music, not that she listens to, but some of the music out there doesn't qualify for that. I'm sorry.
Back on the sports side, can you pick from your memory the favorite live sporting event that you've ever attended?
This surprises people when I tell them, but I saw Yvonne Goolagong win Wimbledon when she was 19, and I was about 13 years old, and we were there. The electricity of this young lady who was an Aborigine, one of, I believe, 8 children. Her mother is illiterate. Her father was a sheep shearer. The Aborigines were treated sort of, perhaps, you know, you could make an equitable comparison to the African Americans. There were a lot of prejudice against them at one time. They were treated like second-class citizens. And for some reason, she wandered down into a park area in the town that she was living. They were living on the fringes, of course, and a guy invited her, come on over and take a racket and have a hit. And it was apparent rather quickly that she was gifted. So I actually saw her win Wimbledon when she was 19. I saw her beat Billie Jean King and Margaret Court back-to-back. She beat the number 1 and 2 seeds. It wasn't that she was unknown. She was, you know, maybe the 4th seed or 5th seed or something like that. It's that she was so young and just her game was so flawless. And I'll never forget the electricity. I'm going to give you a second, was of course the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl in January of 1970. It was a fun game. It was played in New Orleans. In fact, I think the trumpeter Al Hurt, who I think just passed away, the jazz trumpeter, played before the game. So that's one of my memories. But that was exciting because it was unexpected too. The Chiefs were a wild card team, and they unexpectedly sort of got there, and they were against a team that was, you know, really a very, very good team, the Minnesota Vikings, and it was very unexpected.
Phenomenal stories.
Yes.
So Kansas City is renowned for its barbecue. Do you have a favorite barbecue dish?
Am I supposed to name them?
Well, whether it's like burn ends or chicken.
Burn ends.
Yeah?
Burn ends, yeah.
Going with the classic.
Sure, yeah, the easy one.
I got to have my first a couple weekends ago, and I can definitely see why it has a reputation as the favorite.
You can't go wrong in this town. I know the Mavericks have a very devoted sponsor, Plowboys.
Yes.
It's very, very good, so I'll give them a shout out.
Well deserved.
But there are others that are fantastic. In fact, just Friday night, a friend of mine came in from high school. He was doing a barbecue pilgrimage with one of his kids, and I said, "What's your waistline going to be like after this trip?" And he sampled 3 or 4 different places, and he'd been to Memphis, and I think he'd also been to Alabama. And he said the Kansas City barbecue was by far the best.
It is phenomenal. Last question for you, Lamar. It's been a great summer for the Olympics. We've seen some phenomenal stories. Michael Phelps continuing his legacy, Katie Ledecky, an outside connection to the Mavericks, the niece of Islanders owner John Ledecky.
That's right.
Going back to your sports experience, I feel like tennis might be a theme here rising again, but do you have a favorite Olympic memory from an event that you saw? Maybe live or on television?
You know, I've never been to the Olympics. We've never done that. We've been privileged to go to the World Cup of soccer. We're going to do that with hockey here coming up, which will be sort of a bucket list, I think, for a lot of people. As far as the Olympics, I think I gravitate towards the track and field, and I sort of marvel. Having run some track in high school, I marvel at the hurdlers, because I tried to be a hurdler. That was sad. It's really good conditioning. And I marvel at the ones that run the 400 and the 800. The speed now is amazing. I can remember trying to run what at the time was the 440 hurdles, and how unbelievably exhausting just to run one time around the track and figure out how to pace yourself. Well, now the level is phenomenal. So I just marvel at that, those athletes and what they can do.
I'm with you on that. I've done a half marathon myself and some distance races, and I watched the women's marathon over the weekend, and they were maintaining a sub 6-minute mile pace for 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours, and it just boggles my mind.
Yeah,
but
they're very fit.
World-class athletes for sure.
Yeah, the swimming is nice, and the reason I say that is it's to marvel at too. Just the physiques of these guys and gals, and just the Americans. You have to admire our level of winning throughout. It's very admirable.
Well, Lamar, it's been a pleasure getting to sit down and spend some time with you. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been wonderful, and hopefully we'll get to do it again at some point over the course of a successful Mavericks season.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ray, so much.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.